I got into a discussion yesterday with a woman concerning Easter and the seventh day Sabbath. I mean, that's how our conversation began. And by the time it was over with, we had moved on to whether Christians are expected to obey the law. And of course, the typical Christian remarks on those. There's 613 mitzvot or 613 laws, and I'm going, okay, well, I've been through all of them, and I find that about half of them aren't there. They're not really there. And then even still after that, some of the ones that are there do not apply to me. For instance, since I'm not a man, I don't have to worry about how I trim my beard. So, I mean, there's seriously not 613 to start with. But then, as typical with Christians, they move on to, well, we can't keep the law anymore because there's no temple. And I don't understand how they're getting it mixed up, the temple versus the law, because the temple was where the sacrifices were offered. The sacrifices were offered for sin. And we know that the sacrifices were put on hold because Yeshua paved the way for us to get into the resurrection. We don't have to worry about that anymore. So this is what I'm trying to explain to her the difference is. Like I said, the sacrifices were for sin, and sin is the transgression of the laws of God. I mean, there's nobody that doesn't say that in the Bible. Sin is the transgression of the law. So the difference is that, I don't need the temple to, help my brother or my neighbor pull his bull out of a ditch. I don't need the temple to not eat pork and shellfish. I don't need the temple to not wear clothing that are mixed fabrics. I don't need the temple to, keep the feast days. I don't have to have the temple for any of that. The temple was strictly for the sacrifices for when you just obeyed the law. So what I'm trying to explain to people is that we have to keep the law. I mean, there's nobody in the Bible that tells us that we aren't obligated to keep the laws of God. We just know that, if we love God the way that Yeshua told us to love with all of our hearts and minds and bodies and everything, then we are going to do our best to keep the laws, knowing that if we mess up, that we have an advocate with the Father, and Yeshua pleads our case for us, and, they didn't know, they messed up, whatever. So we don't have to worry about that, about whether or not we accidentally, screw up. Now, once we know that a law, or know of the law, like y'all know that we're not supposed to be eating pork and shellfish. God said that is unclean to us. So we're not supposed to be eating that. And then if you eat it deliberately, that's a different story. Because, Paul said in Hebrews chapter 10, he said, if we sin willfully, that's deliberately, if we sin willfully, there's no more sacrifice. You can't, not having the temple and having Yeshua plead our case is by no means an invitation to just ignore the law completely. I need you guys to try to understand the difference.